I'll be honest, walking into this week's episode of The Promised Neverland, I expected 2 minutes of Norman's backstory at most. I didn't think they'd fully cut it out, but at the same time, we have episodes 8, 9, 10, and 11. We're not getting another season by the looks of it. Are they really going to dedicate a good chunk to his backstory? And to my surprise, they actually did. Even though we knew he was experimented on, even though we knew he had a pretty shitty life after his already pretty shitty life, it was actually nice of a surprise to see that behind that door was his new father, and yeah, things are too good to be true. And I still stick by what I said, is I think this should have happened before Emma and Ray met back up with Norman. I think that would have been better placed, just because a lot of what happens in his backstory would be shocking, because nothing in it is truly that shocking, except for the fact that he made an explosive and kind of destroyed that entire facility by the looks of it. But the content itself was solid, and I was honestly eyes glued to the screen. They even touched upon things I didn't think they would, because if we got Norman's backstory in this episode, I was convinced the side cast that he kind of made into his miniature army, there wouldn't be too much to them. And you could argue there wasn't all that much. Sure, there was the one guy who was playing with a Rubik's Cube, passing notes to, obviously, our boy Norman, but then you get to see just some of the still shots, which sometimes still shots can actually work incredibly well in terms of explaining how bad or good something was. And for these characters, seeing them just in agony, screaming, pulling their hair out, and then the fact that when Norman comes to rescue them, they say, "Are you God?" It does paint into a picture why they follow him with such obedience by the looks of it, and they really did a great job, I thought at least, that they actually explain Norman's backstory. The biggest fault in terms of the whole Norman reveal is that if this backstory would have came before that reveal, I think it would have been, or even if the backstory came right after his reveal would have worked too. He rescues Emma and Ray. We're like, what the hell, why is he here? The next episode we kick off with that backstory, and then we get, obviously, everything else that happened. By doing that, I think it wouldn't have been as shocking, because you have a lot of really good content here that I think would have been really shocking to see what he went through had we not known about the drugs and the experimentation up until this point. But still, the content itself, I thought was exceptional. This is what I want to see from Promised Neverland Season 2. Yeah, sure, it still feels like we're in the Season 3 out of a 3-season anime, but really we're in Season 2. The middle portion is clearly removed, but the content is good. The worst part about this episode to me was the forest content, because at this point I'm bored of the forest. I see the importance because Norman really just wanted them gone so he could launch his assault, but at the same time, these are the characters believing that they have a time limit and they have to get these characters to him, otherwise there's going to be a massacre. And the massacre itself, I thought was really well done. The music and the overall directing, I thought was probably some of the best we've seen since some of the highlights of Season 1, where it really felt horrifying. It felt like characters doing things either because they really, really wanted to, in the case of most of Norman's subordinates, but in the case of Norman, this isn't a site where he's going to be happy about doing it. He feels like there's a gun to his head, and massacring an entire village is the only way to do so. They actually use tropes that I've seen before, and usually I would hate them in this episode, and I actually liked it. The fact that the one demon who was blind and was always going to that altar, he has a granddaughter named Emma. I've seen this trope done a lot of different ways, and I don't really recall ever seeing it done and I wasn't annoyed by it, because in this episode, there's a moment where he says Emma, and that for a brief moment gets through to Norman, because he doesn't want to do this. It's crystal clear. He's just mad, he has no time left, and he wants to protect his family, and he believes that someone has to be a sacrifice. It worked once when he was the sacrifice and let others escape from the farm, and right now he has to get his hands dirty because he's gonna die anyway, so he might as well take on all the burden himself. Generally, when you get the name drops that remind them of someone, it makes them completely stop what they're doing. In this episode, had Emma and Ray not got back there in time, he was going to commit in finishing it up. He was sad, he was disgusted, and you could tell just how much he didn't want to do it. But at the end of the day, he had no choice. He already launched the attack, there's no going back. Now the question remains, because Emma is there, we clearly aren't going to continue with this assault. There's no way at that point because Emma doesn't want to do that. And I'm sure that will anger some people, but I do think there's going to be a middle ground. I think it was last week I was talking about the fact that in a perfect world, what you would do is you would kill the government because they're the ones behind everything, destroy the experimentation facilities, kill the people who are continuing to let demons feed on humans, and let the general people just kind of change. Obviously it wouldn't be perfect, but it'd be better than nothing. And in this episode, you do really get to see, I think in probably the most brutal and best way possible, that this is just a group of general people. Yeah, they eat humans, but we eat animals, right? So what they did in seeing the graphic nature of just them turning and mothers and daughters and sons and babies just turn and get eaten by their loved ones. It was a pretty powerful and brutal episode that they didn't hold back in the slightest. Granted, they're demons, so they probably could get away with a lot more graphic nature than if it was like literally just humans. I don't think we would have seen as graphic of like babies being devoured by their mother or something like that. Sure, there's been like children in test tubes, but what we were seeing here with like the deformities and modifications, I think the reason we got it was because it's demons, not humans, if I'm being honest. But I think they did a great job at saying, like, you know, at this point, they're too far gone, this is what has to happen, one side will win and one side will lose. But at the same time, with the history we learned with episode 7 last week, I do think there's a way to kill the government. I'm sure, like, you know, this village isn't going to be saved. But then again, I mean, based on the fact that the granddaughter drank the grandpa's blood and immediately it kind of regressed, maybe there is a way to save a lot of the people who have been turned, but I mean, if you've been devoured by your family member, I mean, you can't really revive the dead at that point. So it's going to be interesting to see the direction they want to go, because even though I don't think we're going to commit to more of this, I do think they showed and committed enough that it should satisfy a lot of people, even if it's temporarily making them happy. For me, based on what we've seen, I blame the government above all else. Kill the government, kill the experimentation facilities, but the general people, yeah, give them a shot to change and, like, you know, modify their DNA with the blood and things like that, the whole demon's blood, and see what happens there. And if that doesn't work, well, maybe, yeah, you'll launch your second attack there. And it's going to be interesting to see how they'll handle the remaining 3 episodes, because while I know this won't please everyone, it never will at this point with Promised Neverland Season 2. As someone who wanted a Norman backstory, they gave it to me. Sure, they didn't give it to me when I initially wanted it, but they gave it to me nonetheless, and the actual brutality and how they directed it in such a horrifyingly brutal but exciting fashion. The massacre, I think, was handled exceptionally well, and had Emma and Ray not got there, you know, Norman was going to finish the job there. And even though I don't think we're going to go back to exactly this, I don't think the government and the people who have been keeping secrets from the general demons are not going to, like, get away scot-free. Those are the characters who I think are going to get killed. And personally, for me, I'd love to see a middle ground sort of resolution here. But then again, anything can happen. The only thing that actually worries me about Season 2 at this point is I honestly think Mama is irrelevant. They brought her back, but I don't really see why at this point, because at this point, if we were betting, most of us could probably agree that Mama's gonna come back at the very end just to give them all a hug and say that she loves them, right? Like, there's no real plot importance, but then again, maybe that will be like the kind of curveball that Mama will come in and will be the last obstacle, because I mean, if you've already launched a giant bomb on a city, maybe Mama will be the last true opponent you have to face. There's still room for it. I mean, granted, I didn't think we were going to get a Norman backstory and they showed it to me, so it's not impossible that they don't make Isabella actually relevant, but at the same time, I just don't have faith that they're going to do anything with her, so it might have been better just to cast her aside. Obviously, I'm going to leave it open to interpretation for now. I'm not going to say they ruined Mama's introduction of Season 2 because they haven't done anything. There's still room to do more with her, but I can't be the only one feeling that. Kind of worried that Mama's not going to have any importance, all things considered, besides maybe an emotional hug moment or something like that. But overall, I think this was definitely one of the stronger episodes, at least for an anime only like myself. I didn't really feel like they rushed through too much. I felt like the idea of the backstory was paced well enough. I mean, there's probably more from the manga, and the overall execution of the city was great. The only real boring part was the forest content, but even then, it did serve a purpose, and to see their shocked reactions after realizing that Norman kind of bamboozled them, I thought it was a great moment overall. I mean, I was really happy with this episode. I can't deny that it is Season 3 of a 3-season Promised Neverland anime, but in terms of the actual content, it's good. Sure, I wish we would have had a middle portion, but I mean, so far the endgame's shaping up to be pretty violent. I didn't think they were going to commit like this just because Emma didn't want to, but I mean, leave it to Promised Neverland to go it with an explosive bang, and I really like that kind of like final touch to see that Norman is still just that kid crying and he doesn't want to do it but feels like he has to. I thought it was a great touch overall, and I'm excited for more. Maybe not everyone will be, but let me know your feelings down below. As always, all I ask is you be respectful. If you hated the episode, let me know why you hated it. Just please don't attack me or others just because we may have a different opinion. It's just anime at the end of the day. It's not that serious. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, show your support, and hit that subscribe button if you happen to be new around here. So until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.